main issue is them being secrecy jurisdictions,
yes,
and the opacity of them. But actually, a lot of tax havens aren't secrecy jurisdictions. I mean, Ireland is a tax haven. I think Google, I'm right in saying, doesn't pay tax in this country by running profits through Ireland.
Yes.
Starbucks runs its profits, I believe, through Holland and Switzerland. Amazon pays no tax by running its profits through Luxembourg.
Yes.
So the point is, even with transparency, they can use transfer pricing to perfectly legally shift their profits to somewhere with a lower corporate tax rate and not pay tax.
Yeah.
So isn't the opacity only part of the problem? There's also another issue, which is dealing with other countries which are trying to undercut each other in a kind of race for the bottom.
Yes.
And saying, register here because we will charge you less tax. They move the profits, and actually it's quite legal. This isn't evasion, this is just perfect legal avoidance. So even if you know it's happening, unless you change the law dramatically, you can't do anything about it.
There are some places like Ireland which are tax...
Sorry, transfer pricing.
Okay. Yeah. There are some places like...
transfer pricing?
Transfer pricing is when you have two companies under common ownership. So, let's take an example. Ford UK and Ford Spain are both owned by Ford USA. When Ford Spain sells an engine to Ford UK to put in a Ford Transit van, that's transfer priced, because it's done between companies inside the same group under common ownership. So there's no market price for that. There's actually got to be a transfer price. Now what transfer pricing does is supposedly sets the price for that engine at the same price as if they had been entirely independent companies. So you make believe, so much of international tax is make believe. You know, tax havens are make believe, but transfer pricing is make believe. You make believe that there's an independent price for a part finished Ford engine. Now there isn't a market for part finished Ford engines. You want a finished one, or you might want a Ford Transit, but you don't want a part finished. Well, I suppose somebody might somewhere. But you then spell it as spares, and you're actually paying more than you would do if you're going to put it in a final vehicle. The point is, they don't sell them in that state to anybody else. So you have to make up rules about how you price between those two companies. And it's meant to be this arm's length principle. Now that was designed in 1935 by the League of Nations. There's not much left from 1935 that the League of Nations did, because it got swept away by the Second World War, but they managed to decide that this was the basis for allocating profits between states. It's ludicrous. It was ludicrous then, it's even more ludicrous now, and the basic reason is that you're meant to go find the comparable price. Well, there is, as I say, no comparable price for that. But let's think about something which has even less chance of finding a comparable price. What is the price that you have to pay within Starbucks to learn how to pour hot water onto coffee? Well, apparently that's 6p in the pound for every one sold. You know, that's the price for learning how to put boiling water onto coffee. Oh, no, slightly less than boiling water. I'm sure it's terribly important. It's 97.4 degrees or something. Yeah, but that's the price you pay for the intellectual property. But Starbucks will, of course, never sell the intellectual property of Starbucks to anybody but Starbucks. Because if they did, they wouldn't have the competitive advantage that they claim they have by making their coffee their way, which is so fundamentally different from the way that Costa make it, or whatever else. But which you pay a price for. Now, so transfer pricing is the way in which profits are moved between countries, because what happens is you underprice from high tax locations and you overprice from low tax locations, so you end up with your profits in a low tax location and not in a high tax location. And that's what I accuse Google of, and Amazon of, and Apple of, and Microsoft of, and eBay of, and Starbucks of, and so on. That long list of ones is how I try to work out that these companies will do that. And yes, invariably, the Netherlands ends up in the story, and so does Ireland, and so does Luxembourg. And we've made up some funny names for these, like the double Dutch and the Irish sandwich. You know, there's the Dutch sandwich, and there's a double Dutch, and we've got all sorts of silly names which we've made up. We've actually gone into the press. So we actually made up one rather silly night with an American journalist called Jesse Drucker from Bloomberg. And I admit that the bottle of wine was involved, and we made up these silly names for these ways of doing. And now they're reported in the press as though they're serious. Be careful what you do over the bottle of wine with the journalist. The point is that actually, yes, a country like the Netherlands is deliberately going out of its way to be a tax haven. They were completely shocked in 2007 when I, with a couple of Dutch guys, wrote a small, big pamphlet, small book called "Is the Netherlands a Tax Haven?" And we said yes. Got massively discussed in their parliament. How dare these two guys be so treasonous as to say this? Well, because it's glaringly obviously true. But in those cases, no, you're right, there is not secrecy. The answer there is called unitary taxation. Unitary taxation, I'm going to explain it. What time is it? Yeah, I've got 3 minutes with the unitary taxation. Maths lessons coming up. Unitary taxation assumes that you have a group of companies. Well, that isn't an assumption. You have got a group of companies. This is reality. Transfer pricing works on the assumption we've got a whole pile of independent companies, except they're not. So that one is completely ludicrous. Instead, unitary taxation, which was the alternative considered in 1935, by the way, this isn't radical or new, this was the other option, which they decided was just too boring at that time because there wasn't enough world trade. It assumes that there's a multinational group of companies. And what it says is that that multinational group of companies publishes a set of accounts. Big, thick book. HSBC's is 500 pages. And it has a profit figure. And that is the profit figure for the whole group. And what it then says is that must be earned somewhere. And the job of unitary taxation is to allocate that global profit, which is again a problem which didn't exist in 1935. There were no global corporations then. To countries. And it does it on the basis of a formula. And the formula looks at where are your people, where are your customers, where are your physical assets, tables, but also mining equipment or computers or buildings or whatever. And every company, you cannot make money without people, without customers, and without physical assets. Every company in a group will eventually have those three things. So, the rule in America where they use this to allocate profits between the individual states within the USA, that's how they allocate profits for corporation tax. Because many American states have got corporation tax. They can't be bothered to prepare separate accounts for each state. They do it as a US figure and divide it between the states. 1/3 goes to labour, 1/3 goes to sales and so on. So if, let's take an example, a company makes, let's make a big number, 100 million. And it's got 10% of its workforce in the UK. Then 1/3 of its 100 million will be allocated on the basis of where its workers are. So 1/3 of 100 million is, well, 33 million near enough. And 10% of that is going to be in the UK, so we get 3.3 million of its profit allocated to us because 10% of its workforce is here. If 20% of its, I'm making this up as I go along by the way, so I hope somebody's doing the maths for me in the background. 20% of its sales are here, that's another 1/3 of its global profits. Another 33 million is allocated on that. 20%, 6.6 million coming here now, nearly 6.7 million actually, because 20% of its sales. Half of its physical assets are here. That's 1/3 again of its total profits, 33 million allocated on that, that's 16.6 million coming to the UK. So we've now got 26.6 million of profits would be allocated to the UK on the basis of this formula. Now the problem is one, agreeing the formula, although actually Europe has already decided a formula for Europe. We've already got it negotiated, it's just waiting to happen. So this isn't pie in the sky stuff. 15 countries in Europe want to do this. And if we get a financial transaction tax for Europe approved next week by a minority of governments, which is possible next Tuesday, that's when the meeting is, then those other 15 governments who want to do unitary taxation can say, yeah, okay, fine, we've approved this, we'll go on and do unitary tax on a minority basis as well. I know 15 isn't a minority of 27, but it's less than 27, which is in these terms, in European terms, a minority. Consensus, yeah. So we could do that, but the point about it is, in a tax haven company, there are normally no employees, no assets, and no sales to any genuine customers. And so how much profit is allocated to the tax haven company? We're back to that nice round number, 0. Hey, perfect. That's why we like unitary taxation.
Okay, thanks. So Peter Colville.